Good afternoon, Year 6. Welcome to Reading for Pleasure. It is the second instalment of Titanic Young Survivors by Alan Zullo. This chapter is called I'm Not Dead Yet, about John B. Jack Thayer III. Jack Thayer looked over the side of the sinking Titanic and stared into the frigid Black Sea. He knew he had to jump, but he just couldn't do it. Not yet. Plunging into the water so cold it could make one's heart stop was his only hope, which wasn't much. I'm probably going to die, he thought, but what choice do I have? It wasn't supposed to end this way for 17-year-old John B. Jack Thayer III. His life had been scripted from the day he was born into a wealthy family from Haverford, Pennsylvania. His father, John, was a vice president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, and his mother, Marion, who was raising 4 children, had come from a prominent family. Jack's childhood thrived from everything that wealth and privilege could bestow on a kid: a mansion staffed by servants and maids, private schools with the best athletic coaches, and European vacations at the finest resorts. His father had Jack's future all planned out. Upon graduation from Haverford School, Jack would attend Princeton and then live in London, Paris, Berlin or Vienna, where he would apprentice with the sharpest minds in international banking. Then he would return to the United States and begin a lucrative career in high finance. Yes, his future was all planned out. Facing death on a sinking ship was not part of the plan. Jack, his parents, and mother's maid, Margaret Fleming, had enjoyed a fun-filled vacation in Europe and were returning home aboard the Titanic. They were among more than 300 first-class passengers spoiled by the white-gloved service of hundreds of stewards and stewardesses at their beck and call. Jack occupied a spacious wood-panelled stateroom next door to his parents on sea deck. Instead of a small porthole, his room featured a full window. Like all first-class accommodations, his stateroom had hot and cold running water, a private bathroom, and an individually controlled heater. On board, his father introduced Jack to the rich and powerful captains of industry and big business, including one of America's wealthiest men, John Jacob Astor IV. The teenager and his dad also mingled with the very people most responsible for building the world's greatest ship: Thomas Andrews, one of the Titanic's designers, Anthony Archie Frost, the builder's chief engineer, and J. Bruce Ismay, chairman and managing director of the White Star Line, which owned the ship. Impressed by his intelligence, charm and manners, the men often included Jack in their daily discussions. On Sunday, April the 14th, Jack spent most of the sunny but brisk day walking on the promenade deck with his parents, stopping for brief chats with Andrews and Ismay. Later that afternoon, as temperatures began to drop rapidly, Ismay showed the Thayers a wireless message that had been received a few hours earlier from the SS Baltic, a ship a few hundred miles west of the Titanic. It read, in part, "Captain Smith, Titanic. Have had moderate variable winds and clear fine weather since leaving. Greek steamer Antennae reports passing icebergs and large quantities of field ice today in lat 41 degrees 51 north, long 49 degrees 42 west. Wish you and Titanic all success. Commander." "We might see some icebergs and growlers," Ismay told the Thayers. "What are growlers?" Jack asked. "Small bergs that have broken off the big ones," Ismay answered. "You probably won't spot any today because it'll be dark by the time we reach the field ice, around 9 p.m. That evening, the Thayers dressed in their finery for dinner. Because his parents were invited to dine with friends in the ship's elegant a la carte restaurant, Jack chose to eat alone in the dining saloon. After his meal, he struck up a conversation with Milton Long, son of Judge Charles Long of Springfield, Massachusetts. "I've been traveling alone throughout Europe the last few months, and now I'm heading home," said Milton, a strapping, dark-haired young man who looked about Jack's age, but was 29. "I was skiing in St. Moritz. Exhilarating. Didn't break any bones, although I had my fair share of spills. I also tried bobsledding. Let me tell you, my friend, flying down a curvy run at blinding speeds can make your life flash before your eyes. Ever try it?" "No, but I did some skiing a few weeks ago in Switzerland and Austria with my parents. We were also in Holland, Germany, and England on holiday." "Milton, who had attended college but never graduated, said he was a globetrotter in search of a good time. In fact, he'd travelled around Europe the previous year. Of all his exploits, the most exciting happened on June 29th, 1911. He was a passenger aboard the steamer Spokane on a voyage through Alaska's Inside Passage when it struck an uncharted rock in Seymour Narrows and was wrecked. Of the 250 passengers aboard, only one perished. "The only time I got my feet wet was when I had to jump from a lifeboat to the shore," Milton told Jack. "The Spokane incident is the real reason I'm on the Titanic. I planned to go home earlier on a different ship, but my father didn't want any more danger to befall me, so he insisted I sail on her. She's unsinkable." Jack and Milton traded stories about their travel experiences and talked about Jack's favourite hobby, collecting stamps. After more than 2 hours, they parted company, agreeing to meet in the morning. Pulling up the collar of his coat to ward off the frosty night air, Jack took a walk on the deck and admired the starlit sky. "I've never seen stars shine brighter," he thought. "They sparkle like cut diamonds." A light haze, barely noticeable, hung low over the water. Although he had spent much time on the ocean, he'd never seen the sea smoother. "It's a night that makes me feel glad to be alive." After saying good night to his parents, he went into his cabin, where he put on pyjamas and cracked open the window, allowing in a cool breeze. As he was ready to climb into bed, he felt the ship make a sudden movement to port. The engine stopped, creating an eerie silence, except for the breeze whistling through the open window. Soon he heard the distant noise of running feet and muffled voices in the passageway. Curious, he put on his slippers and heavy overcoat and called out to his parents. "I'm going up on deck and see all the fun." "I'll join you once I get dressed," his father said. It was freezing cold when Jack reached the deck. He looked around, but didn't see anything out of the ordinary, except for some small chunks of ice scattered on the starboard side of the forward deck. After his father arrived, Jack stopped a crew member and asked, "What happened?" "The ship hit an iceberg," the crewman replied. "Over there." He pointed off the starboard side, but their eyes hadn't adjusted to the darkness, and they couldn't spot it. They soon noticed that the ship was angled slightly toward the bow. Coming in from the cold, the Thayers went into a lounge where several passengers were milling around, not concerned in the least. They were smoking, playing cards, or having a nightcap. Neither Jack nor his father were worried, believing, as most everyone else did, that the ship was unsinkable. Just then, Jack spotted Andrews, Ismay, and several officers hurrying through the lounge. He couldn't help noticing they all looked grim. Mr. Thayer stopped Andrews and said, "So, my good man, what are we facing here?" "It's a dire situation," Andrews replied, his face etched in dismay. "The ship is taking on water from a gash in the forward compartments on the starboard side. She doesn't even have much more than an hour or two to live." Then Andrews and the others marched out of the lounge. The news rocked Jack. "I can't believe what I just heard," he said. "If Andrews said it, it must be true," replied Mr. Thayer. "No one is better qualified to know than the man who helped design the ship." By 12:15 p.m, the stewards were pounding on the doors of all the cabins, urging passengers to get dressed and put on their life jackets. Jack and his dad rushed back to warn his mother. She and her maid were already fully dressed. Jack scurried into his room and put on 2 vests, a tweed suit, a life jacket, and an overcoat. Then the Thayers and their maid hustled up into the lounge on A deck, which was rapidly filling with nervous passengers. Jack's new friend, Milton Long, came over to him and asked, "Mind if I stick with you, old sport?" "Of course you can," Jack replied. In the crush of shoving, surging people, Jack lost sight of his parents and the maid. He and Milton searched the lifeboats as they were being lowered, but couldn't find them. By now, several of the boats had already left the ship. "They must have gotten in one of the boats," he shouted to Milton above the din of the steam vents. "What do you think we should do?" Milton yelled back. "Not seeing any more women or children in the area," Jack said. "Let's see if we can find a lifeboat." A throng of men was pressing to get into the last 2 forward starboard boats. He saw Ismay, who earlier had been assisting women and children, hop into lifeboat C, the last one from that section of the ship. "It's now every man for himself," Jack told Milton. They watched 2 stewards jump into lifeboat C from the deck above, An officer on the lower deck fired 2 shots in the air as a warning to anyone else who thought about leaping into the boat. The stewards were ordered out before it was lowered. All that were left were 2 collapsible boats lashed to the roof of the officer's cabin on the boat deck, on the foot of the first funnel. "Shouldn't we find our way into one of the remaining boats?" Milton asked. "The ship isn't going to stay afloat much longer." "I don't think we should try it. There's so much confusion. Those last 2 boats might not reach the water the right side up." "You think we're going to die?" Jack shook his head. "I'm not ready yet." They leaned over the side and watched what they thought were the last lifeboats, rowing away from the sinking ship. The sloping deck was now about 40 feet above the surface. "What are you going to do?" Milton asked. Seeing the dangling falls that had lowered the lifeboats, Jack replied, "I'm going to jump out and catch one of these falls, then slide down into the water and swim to the closest lifeboat." "Are you daft?" Milton said. "If you jump from here, you might hit a floating steamer chair or wreckage and get knocked unconscious. Besides, the water below is freezing. The cold will kill you within minutes. That is, if you don't drown from the suction when the ship goes under. Even if you're wearing a life jacket, jumping into the water is not a good idea." "Yeah, I guess you're right," Jack said glumly. The 2 walked over to a sheltered stairway near the second funnel and pondered their next move. The roaring of the exhaust steam had stopped. So now all that could be heard was the band playing hymns and desperate people lamenting their fate. "If I don't make it sport, will you please let my parents know that my last thoughts were of them?" Milton said. "And tell them I'm ever so grateful for the swell life they provided me. If the worst happens to me, let my mother and father know that I love them very much," said Jack. Neither said anything for the next several minutes, lost in their thoughts about their mortality. Jack pictured some of the grand times he'd enjoyed in his privileged life with his brother, 2 sisters and parents, and how good they'd all been to him. "Father had everything planned out for me. It doesn't look like I'm going to live it," he thought. He felt sorry for his parents and siblings and how much they grieved for him, and he felt sorry for himself. But then Jack snapped out of his self-pitying mood. "I'm not dead yet. As long as I'm still breathing, there's still hope." "I'm jumping," he announced. Milton grabbed him by the arm and said, "It's too dangerous. From here it's at least a 40-foot jump." "We can't stay here. We have no other choice." Milton sighed. "You're right, but let's wait until the deck is about 10 feet from the waterline and then jump, so we're less likely to hurt ourselves. This will still give us time to swim away from the suction when the ship goes down." By 2:15 a.m., the vessel was listing hard to port and taking a sharper angle downward. Water had engulfed the bow and was moving rapidly towards the bridge, forcing hundreds on deck to scramble toward the rising stern. "Are you ready to jump and swim for it?" asked Jack, tightening his life jacket. "Not really," Milton replied. "I'm not a very good swimmer." "Swim hard. Your life depends on it." By now, the water was about 12 feet from the deck. Join me again tomorrow for the concluding part of our story and more dodgy accents and melodramatic reading.